So we've drafted like the mandarin collar. So from the centre back, we've measured, put a notch. So this is your back neck measurement. We put a notch at the side seam. Then we drafted the rectangle, and from the side seam to the centre front is the front neck measurement. Then we've added on half of our wrap because we need to button it up. So 2 centimetres means the wrap's 4. So, and then we just curve that edge off, and then to make it shape like the mandarin collar, from the centre front 5 centimetres step back, we've just snipped it and closed it out. So it's like the draft of the mandarin collar, apart from adding on half the wrap. So whatever your wrap is going to be, we'll do 2 centimetres to make a 4 centimetre wrap. You can refer to your handout. You can see here from this centre front point here, these are right angles. So continue that centre back line up, and then using your pattern master, put the right angle on the centre back line, and then make sure your paper's really flat. At the centre front point here, you want to draw a line perpendicular. Do it dashed because that's going to be your fold line. And so it's right angle here, and it's coming out and touching the centre front point there. So you can see my line I've drawn. We will then be folding along that line. Make sure you can see through your paper this original line here, so make sure this one is nice and strong. This top edge, which should be smaller because you took the wedge out of it, so we fold along that line that we've just drawn, and then you can use your tracing wheel to trace that line through. So, trusty tracing wheel, when it's folded, you can trace, make sure that's stuck down from this. So you're tracing this shape from the centre front there. Tracing that and that line. You know that's a straight line. And you can see your dots. Hopefully see your dots. Okay, and then you can use that. So you're just making a mirror copy of this line, that's all you're doing. So from here, it's a nice mirror. So it's a reflection along your folded edge. Okay. So the design, the style, you're now going to be drawing the top collar on top. So this collar stand, that's referred to as the collar stand, you'll have a pair of those cut on the fold, and then we will draft a top collar and an under collar. Now we will draft this shape, so the depth of it, it needs to go up and over the collar stand. So it has to be, because you don't want to see the collar stand, so it has to be a minimum of the 5 centimetres, a minimum. So I'd probably start with 6, but again these are first drafts depending on what your collar stand is. So with that, this is the centre back, we know, and we're going to draft the under collar. So I said that I'm going to do it at about 6 centimetres and come out at a right angle, sort of roughly opposite the shoulder seam. This section now is complete design decision. So we have lots of traditional shirt collars. So we have feature dramatic shirt collars. Can't see them. And we have 1970s shirt collars. All right, lots of different ones. So you need to think, they don't always come, some are quite small, and then the angle, some are quite close together, some are quite far apart. So these are your design decisions. play around with lots of them. And when we draft in the collar, the under collar, if we just make our design decision, think about how it's going to sit on, how far away it's going to sit. Have a go. You might want to put it on the paper, play around with it, but really it's trial and error. You need to make one to be able to correct it and change it. So just put a line. It's normally a bit longer here, but we can go quite dramatic if we want to. We're not going to do angles, because remember, everything's curvy and shaped. And actually, if you do a straight angle like that triangle there, you'll probably find on the actual collar that it then actually looks a bit more like sort of the Peter Pan collar. So we just tend to shape them in a bit. Now these corners, trickier if they become quite pokey to sew because they're bagged out. So another thing to think about. Did you know when you're sewing a corner that if you've got a corner like this, if you do a stitch across, just a single stitch, it sometimes makes a better corner. So you just do that one like along and then up rather than sewing just and pivoting in the corner. Just a little tip that you can do. So you just need to draft your own design. Remember that on the stand, you know, at the shoulder, we know where the shoulder is roughly, it then blends round the neck. So it's not normally deep past your shoulder here, so that it sits round the back neck, because it just sits at the back neck. It can't be too big. It can, but you need to open it up more. To allow it to sit on the shoulder, this edge here at the moment is the same as the collar stand, the mandarin collar. And that will then sit quite high and it's quite tight. You want it to flare out a little bit. You want it to sit a little bit further out on the shoulder edge. So we need to slash this edge open. And a little bit at the back as well, just because otherwise it will stand against and it won't sort of roll over the collar stand. We want it to open when it hits the body a bit. So the suggestion is that you do 3 slashes, one roughly at the shoulder, and then this time we open them because we want it to flare out. So this line here stays the same. You can see I've added some notches. Different to the shoulder notch. This edge sews to the garment, these two sew together. So we know that they're a reflection because we folded along the line. So we can just put notches in. We know that 2 notches means it's the back. So we might put 2 notches here and then put those 2 notches on the under collar as well. And then we might just put another random one part way on the front neck, just so that we don't get them mixed up. We know where they're going to be. So we then need to slash open in a few places. You could do this on a toile. So you could mock this up and then see how much you need it to open and actually cut the calico if that's your more visual to understand why you're doing that. That's good practice as well. But we're just going to slash it down. Now obviously we know it's harder to open that, we need to slash there. These are 2 separate pieces. This bit here we don't need, this was just for drafting. Alright, so this is the pattern piece, this is the pattern piece. So we can now cut along here to enable us to slash those lines open. Just helps. Okay, and then we can separate those. So then we can open that up. I've suggested 5mm in each. Okay, you may need more, you may need less. Again, it's trial and error, that's why we toile. So open up the pieces of paper, open up the gaps, 5mm, so allow your collar to sit nicely. You can see then I've got a bit of a step there, so I'll have to redraft that line. It has got a bit of a curve on that outside edge. I probably would keep that. Stick those in. So this edge at the bottom hasn't changed. It's just the collar edge that's changed. So you'll be able to, this is your net draft of your collar stand and your under collar. So you'll be able to cut these out, trace them off, add your seam allowances. So you'll have a collar stand. Curve your edges. And then the top edge of the collar stand will sew to the bottom edge of the under collar, but you can see that because we've opened this up, the angle has changed. That's okay. And just remember that obviously this collar only goes to the centre front, so that matches the centre front of the stand. Then the stand's got this extra curve that sews round. So we'll just change that shape there. You then add your seam allowances on. Now this I said was the under collar. So you'll be adding your seam allowances on and you'll have a pattern piece, and then you'll make a top collar by adding the roll on the top edge and then to nothing at this point here. So this stays the same, the bit that sews to the collar stand. So you'll end up with pattern pieces like this, and you can see here I've done stepped seam allowances. So I'm using 1 centimetre to join the under collar and the stand, but here I'm to bag this bit out. I've just done it 1/4 inch, 7 millimetres, and then I've just done a step, so it acts like a notch. You can have it the same seam allowance all the way around and just put a notch at that centre front, but that's key because that sews to that point here, and then the collar stand will be bagged out. You'll need a pair of stands, and then you'll need a top collar and an under collar, and then they need to be interface.